strange. Let me.
So we can get another person.
Oh, weird. Well, my camera's good. I got a good camera. Let me try to go out and in again one more time.
Okay. I wonder if there's an extension cord, because then we can. It might be an extension.
Yeah, that would be much easier.
Getting strangled.
Oh, could these poor cards?
Okay. Hey, see you again. Just bumped into it. They're getting an extension cord.
Okay.
You just adapt.
You better.
Where do you live in Norfolk?
Capri-based, but I'm staying in Lake Michelle.
Where?
Lake Michelle,
Okay. That's the only lake there?
pretty much.
See, if we could be at ICO, right, get like $620 million, $30 million. We got working capital.
We're gonna.
Yeah, around here, it's what, it's almost big. Let's see if people hang out. Yeah. But you can sit in the screen. Jose, I don't know, Roberto. We were thinking that we could sit in the back too. Chair. See if you can fit the chair.
We're just coordinating eating space.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I have no idea why I'm not actually getting a camera. I never have this problem.
Any idea, Marcus? Why he's not getting a camera?
The only thing I can think is driver issues.
Driver issues. Do you have a driver issue, Jose?
I'm a pretty good driver. You know, I get a few speeding tickets every now and again. I gotta remind myself to slow down.
We needed that joke.
Very good.
Let me just, yeah, it's weird. It says camera problem. Let me see if, are we okay to, like, I can try a different computer and see if that changes things.
Sure.
Do you want me to try one more time?
Sure.
Okay, give me 2 minutes and I'll just, I'll log on a different computer. Okay.
Are we going to stay here like?
Yeah, we're gonna.
Okay.
You drive the guys in? What's it made of? Olive oil?
Olive oil, beeswax, coconut oil,
Wow.
essential oil.
Too much olive oil, but whatever.
Oh,
Smells that way too.
Essential oil.
right.
What's that?
So we can get Roberto's one.
It's right here.
Oh, are you there, Roberto?
Hey there, yes.
Are you going to put your camera
Should I?
on? You could. Just so you can see Jose.
Okay, I will. Just a second. Hey there.
Did I tell you this morning? I rushed out here, right? And Conway's giving me a ride here. And so the idea was to leave the car keys with my wife. But when I went to bed, guess what was there? The car keys.
Oh, nice.
Ah, there you go. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hey there.
Am I coming through okay?
Yeah.
You are.
Oh, great. All right. Well, hello. This is really interesting. Yeah, from chilly Melbourne.
Conway was saying we look like a class photo.
Yeah. Whereabouts? What's the city you're in?
Century City. Cape Town.
Say again.
We're in Cape Town, but in a district called Century City.
Century City, Cape Town. Okay. What's the weather like there now? What's your winter like?
Cold.
Is it? It's pretty cold.
Let us dress like that.
Okay. Yeah, I've got my hood too.
You see, look at Roberto. Look how he looks like he's so very summery and fresh.
No, just backlight. Yeah, it's here in Amsterdam. Yeah, has been pretty good month, but of course you never can rely on the weather over here. No, it's not so good. But yeah, I don't have a hoodie, but I could fetch one. But
So, Jose, did you see Roberto's interview? And Roberto, did you see Jose's interview?
I'm sorry, I haven't seen it.
And Roberto, did you see Jose's interview?
yes, I was just actually watching it during the lunch break, so get a little bit of yeah. I just found the website with the videos, and yeah, I had to play it a little bit faster, 1.25 speed, but
Okay.
So maybe Roberto and Jose, maybe each of you can just introduce yourselves to everybody. I think we've watched the talk, but just
Okay.
for 5 minutes maybe, so we can all fill each other in.
And what would you like me to introduce about myself?
Maybe your driving abilities.
Yeah, right, exactly. Okay, so, okay, I'll start, I guess. So, Jose Ramos, and great to be here with you. Originally from California, from Mexican-American heritage. My parents are immigrants to the U.S. from Mexico. Came from abject poverty. I grew up in a fairly affluent sort of Southern California lifestyle, and got my first degree there in comparative literature. Then I moved to, well, I traveled quite a bit in my youth, lived in Japan for a bit, and in Taiwan, a little bit in Spain. And then I met my now wife, and she's a Melburnian, and she brought me to Melbourne, Australia. So I've been here for about 17 years. So fast forward, I did a lot of work in my PhD was in the area of the World Social Forum and looking at alternative globalizations. What are the social movements and thinkers and scholars and visions for an alternative globalization? And so that took up a good part of the last decade, up to about 2011. And And I learned a lot about global social movements and the World Social Forum and some of the challenges in organizing post-capitalist sort of projects. And that really sort of led me to understanding the importance of the commons as an idea and as a process and as a form of governance. That was one of the things that came out of the World Social Forum. It's really that's one of the themes that linked, there were many themes that linked people in the World Social Forums. One of them was the democratic governance of the commons, ecological, political, cultural, economic, building the commons and the democratic governance of shared commons. So I started working with Michel Bawens from around 2006 and 7, collaborating with him. And then that sort of just kind of snowballed. So sort of over time built up a shared language around what it means to do peer-to-peer commoning, and that's sort of the cosmo-localization ideas that I've been sort of working on are sort of an outgrowth of alternative globalization thinking, the different discourses and ideas and social movements around alternative globalizations, but also the peer-to-peer movement and some of the technical language and ideas around that. So so yeah, and I guess, I mean, I've got cosmo-localization is probably one of about 4 or 5 critical themes that I'm working on. So yeah, I'll stop there. But is that enough of an introduction?
That sounds good.
Thank you. Very good.
Maybe just quickly in bullet point, just say what the other themes are. I know one of them is liquid democracy. What are some of the other ones?
Yeah, so I'm very interested in I'm very much interested in peer-to-peer polities. That includes liquid democracy. I'm interested in the big breakthroughs around the world that are happening in transforming the cultural, the political contracts and political culture. So the way that I see those transformations is that they're expressions of new political cultures, and they get established into new political contracts. A little bit like the Magna Carta was a new political contract, and women's suffrage is a new political contract. I see new political contracts emerging in places like Barcelona, in Madrid with Podemos, places like Taipei with the sunflower movement, sunflower revolution, places like Iceland. So we see pockets of these new things, and I find it incredibly inspiring. So that's one. And I also do strategic foresight. And so one of the things that I focus on is looking at mutant futures practices and mutant futures scenarios. So the practices are new forms of hybridity, in the ways that people embody practices of social change, that, you know, instead of having these silos in terms of how we define ourselves, there's this new sort of this new hybridity that's emerging in our practices. And so we're essentially interested in fostering that, but also the idea of mutant futures themselves, the scenarios or the way that we can think about the future, you know, human beings tend to create categorical futures. The future is going to be X or Y or Z. Essentially, they're expressions of our worldviews, the ways that we construct language and the ways that we want to see the future. Oftentimes, they're expressions of our unconscious desires. So mutant futures are futures that incorporate things like what we disown, the disownments and the shadows, and the worldviews that we really dislike as well. that tend to creep up into the realities that we inhabit. So, so that's sort of another space that I play in. But is that enough?
Did you call it mutant futures? M-U-T.
Futures. Mutant futures. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Were there any questions?
Yes.
Roberto, have you got any questions for Jose?
Yes, so Roberto Valenti. I'm originally from Italy, and I moved to the Netherlands about 12 years ago to study artificial intelligence. And since then, I did my PhD also in artificial intelligence and started my company. The idea was to use computers to understand humans so that you could provide better. But of course, being embedded within a market economy, very fast you realize that it's not about what the technology can do. Every company is basically pulled into the direction of where the money is, and that's not necessarily the best direction for the technology. So let's say that a few years ago, I got in touch with the concept of resource-based economy, and you must be familiar as well, right? With the Venus Project, the Zeitgeist movement. And I thought, like, well, that is actually a proper solution, but there is no plan of attack. There is no way to replace basically our current economy with that economy in a blink. So I started to dedicate some time into basically discussing with discussion groups, and I started a meetup over here, Civilization Alpha 0.1. That would be like the first step that we need to take in order to be civilized. So to reach the first civilization, the global civilization, right? So without wars, without poverty, without environmental impact. And yeah, that's, you can fast forward that conversation into like the realization that telling the people about it is not enough. They all say like, well, that sounds all great, but what can we do? And then sometimes you fall short on answers. So like that, a proper approach would be to provide technology, to provide some sort of technology that would enable a digital economy, which would host a different set of rules. So instead of using the rules of the normal market economy with the current tokenization system that we just call money, which is basically creates an emergent behavior that is what we see all around us, to basically create a new one, in a way like a video game, where there is a new set of rules, and if people agree with that set of rules, they could just join in and then interact with the video game. And we did some, so I'm still attached with the University of Amsterdam because of my deal. So I picked up a couple of students and we did some simulations, whether or not, what kind of ideas were required, what kind of rule set was required, and if that rule set would achieve sustainability. And our result was pretty interesting, let's say. But it required one thing, which is one single truth and source of knowledge to be shared across all agents. That was the requirement. I think
Truth?
single truth, yeah.
Truth. What do you mean by? Sorry to interrupt you, but what do you mean by source of truth?
So basically, if you do say, so in the simulation you have the agents, right? And the agent need to have a common knowledge to be able to operate. If that knowledge would be in pocket, then of course there is much more difficulty to understand what it is that is going on, what is the reward system, and so on. So we need basically a database that would store all the knowledge, and it would be able to where agent basically could be able to read that information and act upon it.
Right. Okay. So transparent understanding of what's happening across the entire game.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, basically access to that information. You don't have to know everything, but if you want to ask, you can check it, basically.
Right.
And because of that, also, like if it would be all that information would be owned by a single corporation or cooperative anyway, that would be a problem because of a problem of trust. Who can change these numbers? You know, who has access to this number? Who can change it? Well, this should be something that is pretty fair and common as an information across the entire agent. So that's why we started to look into the blockchain, because that's exactly what the blockchain does. It's just one single source of truth shared across the entire network, and when you set up the rules there, they're basically virtually impossible to change. Then, of course, there is a way to change it, but let's say the standard is that you can't change it. So that's why now lately we've been working on a concept, as we call it, WeQuest, which is an application where people would be able to select their needs. So basically, you start with the Maslow pyramid of needs and say, okay, what do you need? What are your needs? And if you have that kind of information, you'll be able to map what are the local and global needs with respect to so what people input into the platform. Since you geolocalize the demand, you can also allow local providers to satisfy the need directly, right? So you don't have to advertise the product that you have. So I do moving, you know, I do, but instead you can just say, well, I need somebody to move, and then you can select what you would do that day. So it's a bit of demand-based marketplace. But what we have introduced inside that marketplace is the concept of karma, which means if there is a specific need is in high demand equal price. That would be if I fulfill that demand, I will get more karma points. And what does it mean is that you link what is most important on the social level to what gives you the most gain, and we just put these two things. We married that into one single platform, okay. And you have
good, yeah, like it.
So, and the idea is like with this kind of merging, we will have a more fair redistribution of wealth, and also direct focus on what is the most important thing. Right. So,
really interesting.
Yeah. If you have some questions, because otherwise, yeah, usually I tend to talk a lot about it, and
yeah. I'm very interested in this sort of platforms and games because we're essentially experimenting with new models of interaction and value exchange. One thing that we experimented with last month was a thing called a commons credit game, where we combined two software platforms. One was the co-budget of the Inspiral Network in Wellington produced a software called co-budget. That's a distributed way of essentially putting projects forward and getting them funded within a network with a credit sharing platform, like a sharing platform with credit system. Anyways, I don't want to go into the details because it would sort of take a little bit of time, but the gist of it is we're really looking for how we could leverage a kind of critical group of social actors to do distributed, what we call commoning acts for collective good, rewarding people for that, and then giving them a platform where they can exchange that credit. And when you say words like karma, that's essentially what we mean by commons credit. I think we're on. I think we're using similar language. That's something that's collectively valued. That a person provided something, and that they then have this kind of karma point, or what we would call commons credit. Mm-hmm. And so there's different. We basically played with different models by which those things get circulated and exchanged. within that platform. But I think those are really important experiments to have. We just got to keep on doing them and learning from each other. So I'd love to play your game and love to experience that and learn from it.
Mm-hmm. Well, for now we're still prototyping the app because, of course, I mean it works on the simulation, but we need to apply to local communities and see how it works. The idea is like to remove the need of using a monetary system and just using this karma credit system, where you would basically reuse this credit to get more wealth from the local surroundings. And we were talking about.
And it has a good ring to it too, karma credit. I think that's important.
You were breaking off for a second.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just making a very minor point that it has a nice ring to it. When you say karma credit, it's got a good ring to it. Yeah.
All right. Nice. And so the idea would be, okay, what if you use it in local communities that really need this? Of course, this could be like buildings, or it could be like refugee camps of sorts, where basically there are a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands, and they could basically contribute their time and skills towards whatever is needed within the camp. And in order to know what's needed between the camp, we need to allow the people to have this kind of application and click and say like, okay, this is what we need, or this is what we want, and then from that point, then you can organize the commons to focus on it, and that's very important. So the demand base is really the first part. I think that it would be nice to have soon to have a pilot actually in this technology and see how it works and where if there are any pitfall when we apply it in the real life. Of course, the most interesting things is like to see if people find a way to cheat the system, because that's like there's always somebody that tries to get some advantage. So and to from that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I can jump in here for a few minutes. We've been meeting already. Roberto was in this morning on some of the meetings. Jose, you weren't obviously on it, but we were talking about how here in Cape Town, our group can actually start to seed some of these projects. And the idea of inviting everybody to OSCE days was to see if we can all actually create a platform or a framework in which we can actualize cosmo-localization, and in which we can actually start producing real technologies that we can share across the platform to show that we can actually create value within this network. So we can start with a small set of communities, even just our communities. There's like Roberto has his community of innovators in Amsterdam. You have yours in Melbourne. Our other Stop Reset Go members have networks in Perth, of course, Ankle, and and then Ferriol in Edinburgh, Scotland, and we have some people in Mexico, and of course your networks and Roberto's networks are also invited to join. But the whole idea is that we want to actually start creating saloons for problems. As an example, here in Cape Town, we have this water crisis called, we're calling it, we want to have an event called Hack the Cape Town Water Crisis. Because this water crisis is actually, if we don't get enough rain, we might actually run dry. So a city of 4 million people might run dry. And so it's quite serious. And so we're thinking about how we can, innovators here and also maybe working with innovators in the other cities can all come together and create solutions that we can implement here in Cape Town. And
it's a great cosmo localization opportunity, because you actually have to produce something, manufacture something locally that's going to help to solve that problem. And you want to draw from the global knowledge laboratory. Yeah, in terms of the resource, the knowledge resources for that.
So the idea then is that, yeah, the perfect, like that is actually could be a very high profile example, because
Yeah.
if we can actually get our network together and get innovators and do this, it's not only going to solve the crisis in Cape Town, but all that technology can be used across the network, like where you are in
Yeah.
Melbourne or Roberto in Amsterdam, you know?
Yeah.
So, and it's a high profile thing, like in South Africa, the Cape Town water crisis has reached national news level for many months.
Right.
So if we
Right.
can actually, as the commons community, if we can actually tackle this and show that we can actually create technologies that so
Yeah.
many people can use, and we can actually do scenario analysis with this software tool called urban footprinting, where it was created by this company called, I think I talked to you last time, CalThor Analytics in California, and it's open source software, and you can actually use it to, they use it in California to map hundreds of municipalities in Los Angeles, as an example.
Yeah.
So they've made it open source so that any large urban center can use it for mapping hundreds of their own municipalities. So if we collectively come up with a solution, like have this hackathon, we come up with solutions, and then after the hackathon, we can work on it continuously as well.
Yeah.
Then, and we come up with real solutions that we can produce and locally manufacture, and then share that manufacturing knowledge across the network. We can then measure, we can use the urban footprinting software to actually measure, we can predict, do a scenario analysis and say, here's the criteria, say for rainwater harvesting, how many people can afford it? If those people who cannot afford it, can we create technology that they can afford or that they can use?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of thinking. And so if we can do a scenario analysis, we can say, okay, this is the impact we're going to have. We're going to actually reduce our water usage by X%, right? And then we go and we do it, and we see what the actual result is compared to the scenario analysis.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds brilliant.
So there's another example too that I'll just let Marcus speak, because Marcus is working with the Khoikhoi and Nguni people, which total 10 million people between Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, Western Cape, Namibia, and Botswana. And he's brought up to us where their 10 million people, their spokesmen have come to us, and they want us to see if we can find a solution for their people to uplift their communities and to create sustainable local economies. So I'll let Marcus talk about that.
Okay. Great.
Hi guys. So the project is at the brainstorming level at the moment. The idea is that for pretty much 20 years now, the people of the Khoi, the San and Nguni have been waiting for government to do something about their plight. And a lot of them, or the majority of them, is at the economic development level where they don't have the resources to lift themselves up. So they've been waiting for government to provide housing, to provide jobs, and it is just not happening. And they've been talking to me about a system where they provide housing for themselves. So in South Africa, there is a large drive to land redistribution, which is not being handled very well, though that might be my opinion. But it is farming land being moved over to other ownership. And a large part of the land in the Western Cape and the Northern Cape and the Eastern Cape is ancestral Nguni and Khoi and San lands. They're being completely shut out from this process because they're not a political force at the moment. But they're taking it into their own hands. So what they're doing is they're going to the farmers and asking them to share property. So they get land to develop, and in turn for that land, they do jobs like clearing all the non-indigenous vegetation of the land. But they're also in the process of outright buying some farms back. with the idea that once they bought the farm or part of the farm, the farmer that has all the knowledge stays on the farm and teaches them how to do the agriculture. So that's a lot of background. They also want to develop a housing model where they can use that land to house people, especially people who are now caught in the urban environment. So to move them away from the urban center, like Cape Town, out maybe 100, maybe 150 kilometers to the north or to the east, into more rural environments where there is more space available, where it doesn't matter, and this is the part that we really get involved in, to set up an environment where there is no monthly income required in order to sustain the housing models. The government provided housing in the cities all have property tax, electricity, water, sewage, all of those things, which means that even though you get the housing, you still have to have a sizable income to be able to support it. Also, because the housing is not really properly built, your overheads in heating, in managing, in maintenance is very high. So we want to develop a project where once you have the land, you can build the house, provide the electricity, provide the water storage, provide food, all without intervention from government. So the people that go there can develop this for themselves, be completely self-sustainable, and government has no impact on them and has no hold on them anymore.
So is it sounds like a distributed development, or yeah, sort of distributed development model. You want to be able to produce energy as well, like electricity,
Yes.
or and capture your own water, and you're essentially bootstrapping. It's going to be heavily bootstrapped, not relying on a lot of outside funding. So, and what kind of what's the starting point in terms of the kind of machinery and the kinds of tools that you have in terms to do that kind of beginning level production and manufacturing?
So the project that I actually pitched to government a couple of years back, we use sandbag housing. The sandbags you can make out of a lot of easily obtainable materials. The sand is readily available on site. The idea is that you take 100 people from the community that don't have jobs, have somebody there who understands how to pack the sandbags. As a supervisor, you get them to build the houses themselves. And the housing model that we have, you can, with 100 people, you could build a house a day. So in 200 days, you put up 200 houses. Of those 200 houses, each person who contributed to the workforce gets a house for his family. And you have 100 houses spare for the rest of the community. And in the process of building those houses, you also identify those who have the skill to become supervisors. And you train them while this is happening. So when you're finished with the 200 houses, those people can each go out and start a new node of the same process.
Yeah. I mean, it's so indicative of, we have so many assets and so many resources just sitting within us, among our communities and the people around us. If we take that peer-to-peer approach, bringing people together, drawing on the resources that we have, and building from there. Yeah. So how, I guess, how does, I mean, I get how cosmolocalization fits into this, but there's a bridge, you know, there's a bridge between this abstract idea and actually, you know, creating value, people creating value for each other, and applying those ideas. So it's a bigger conversation. That's what it is. It's a bigger conversation that we need to have. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Professor,
Yeah.
maybe it's Conway now. I just wanted to mention
What's your name?
Conway.
Conway. Nice to meet
Conway. So one of the things that you and I, in a sense, have been working on is something called the Legacy Project, which is, I suppose, more around intentional communities, which is a bit like something that we touched on today. As a starting point for Stop, Reset, Go, we all happen to live in the same area, funny enough, which is, I think, not by coincidence. Is that we're literally looking to start this off ourselves in terms of living our legacy, in the sense of literally going through this process ourselves. And I think which is exactly what you're alluding to, is that that's the bridge in itself. That literally otherwise take you out of the conceptual to literally living it, in a sense. So that makes sense. I think that's quite an exciting aspect of it. Then you almost take responsibility for it, that you literally are engaging with it, committed to it.
Yeah.
And that comes with accountability and responsibility. I think we've all handed over a while back. We're all starting to see the repercussions of that. So I think, you know, I said thanks for that window. I think that's kind of what I wanted to share was that.
Yeah.
It's a key element.
Yeah, well, that's one thing I learned about this last two examples that I studied with Chris Giutsatsis, Farm Hack and L'Atelier Paysans, the farming groups in the US and in France that are using this model, that they're very much like participatory action research projects, that they're highly localized, iterative, experimental development projects, you know, with persistent creative work. And of course, you know, the principles behind that with the open source, sharing, creating the knowledge commons is all there. But oftentimes within the digital commons discourse is, well, we've got all these wonderful resources and then it's all just going to be magical and all come together. But what I'm learning from these different examples is that, no, actually there's some really very highly localized processes with people with very specific interests to satisfy and specific needs to satisfy. And so cosmolocalization, in a sense, comes into its own being when those needs are articulated and the projects are driven by those needs and the communities that are working on those needs. So I think that, and then of course, the broader networks are important too, because that's what's going to potentiate that creativity and the development of the model and the learning. So obviously there's these different scales working, but it's easy to forget, or it's easy to you know, to overlook how much applied community-based peer-to-peer work is actually involved in this, and defining what those needs are and what needs are going to be satisfied. Anyways,
actually, that is exactly the starting point of the WeQuest concept, which indeed, let's ask them, right? Let's ask the people to chip in by just advertising their need. And then once we have that, we can really have an overview of what there is to be done, and then the system automatically gives more reward for the most important ones. So as long as we can convince the people to just install this app, then it's very clear that there is a need of water or a need for housing. And when you basically request for a housing, you create a need over there, and you have people that can contribute into to fulfill that need, either with their manual work, or with basically innovative ways to build housing that it can then be shared, so that the people will have to do less of the work. And as fast as we're gonna basically catch up on this building these houses, you would see also the demand of housing to decrease, and then maybe another demand becomes the most important one. So people start to switch the attention, especially if you automate the production of housing. You would see that this goes very fast, right? Into a different the karma. If you produce a house, the karma would slowly go to zero.
So one example of how we plan to try to share knowledge across the platform is when I start building our eco house, and we start developing all these specific technologies. Marcus is a physicist, and him and I have been talking to the Cape Town Science Center, and we've basically approached them with this proposal for this concept called Citizen Science, Engineering, and Technology Development, which we call CSET. And the director really resonated with the idea. So she said that if we can trial one or two technology projects. We originally Marcus and I were working on wind turbines. So we built a wind tunnel using low-tech technologies. I kind of funded it. I bought these big industrial fans and some other things, and we built it at a local makerspace. And we tried it out, but we found that Marcus did the physics and found that it was a bit too small, the wind tunnel. We needed something 3 times the size. So that's what we were looking for, a space that was quite large, and that's how we came upon the Cape Town Science Center. And so they were interested in this, but they have their requirements as well. It has to look nice, it has to be quite interactive, and has to do a lot of different things to keep the attention of the kids involved and the people who visit the Science Center involved. So there's got to be multi modes of usage for it. But in any case, that was one project that creating low cost wind turbines that we can all use. So so they're still interested in that. We're still going to work on that. But the water crisis kind of popped up as kind of the lead project now because there's such a crisis. And if we can actually tackle that and actually make a dent in it, it'll actually showcase the power of cosmolocalization and the power of this approach of pure collaboration. But with the EcoHouse, we have all kinds of other technologies as well. For instance, this idea of modular reconfigurable furniture, where we would build furniture that consisted of surfaces and legs that you could just put together in different blocks, and you can build your tables, different size tables, beds, chairs, furniture. So that concept, we want to put that in our house and showcase it in the house. But if it works here, we actually start small scale manufacturing. We can sell it into the local market. That can raise revenue for this group here. And we can then, if it proves to be successful, then we can then share that design with, say, you in Melbourne, or with Roberto in Amsterdam. And some of your colleagues can actually then start production there, and we can help you to guide you how to set that up. Everybody needs furniture for their home. So that's an idea there that can, I'm just thinking of like small, low-hanging fruit where we can actually demonstrate.
I mean, I think it's really solid. And I think the water crisis is perfect. It's really a perfect barn raising strategy. You know, the idea of barn raising being, the collective of farmers help one farm family put up a farmhouse and then go to the next one and the next one. But in this case, this is the community of hackers and makers globally coming together to help around the water crisis in Cape Town, which then produces knowledge that spills over into the broader world. So I think it's it's very clear. The logic's very clear. Um, what's the kind of what's the time frame and the schedule for this project?
I think my main time frame is before we run out of water.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. You're working on a ecological time frame. Okay.
I think we're open to it. Like we're open to hearing what your ideas are. And, you know, it's all collective. So we we'll have our ideas. The sooner the better, I think.
What's the scale of your community?
Locally
you know,
here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's different ways of understanding community. So there's the people who are sort of like the the nerve center, who have the ideas and are coordinating, like yourselves. Then there's the we might call it the people, the more extended community, people who you can bring in to actually do different things, right? So I just so I get a sense of the scale and what what you're sort of working with in terms of your human potential and assets.
Well, Marcus was thinking that maybe the extended network would be like 100 people, maybe.
Yeah.
So our local network would be maybe 10, like the organizing committee, the brain.
Yeah.
It's there's more that we could access if the academic environment bought into it. Because we have 3 big universities, a couple of technical universities, so there's a lot of students and faculty that could get involved in this as well, but they need to see a project that's or at least look at a project and think that it has potential.
Oh, they have to say something tangible.
Yeah. So if we can get it to the point where it becomes a possibility, we'll get them on board as well. And they, with facilities and funding and a lot of calculators in the form of students.
Yeah.
We did. Marcus and I met with a fellow named Dr. Tom Sanya at UCT, and he seemed very receptive. He was going to be actually one of the speakers at OSCE Days with you guys, but he had another commitment. But he's very open. He's from Uganda, but he's teaches sustainable architecture at UCT, and he's actually been to one of the many communities where he's done work on different kinds of low-cost building structures and so on. And he's also one of the founding members of the Future Waters Research Institute at UCT, which is focused.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think the idea we have is that we can work with you guys, like people in our network who have academic credentials, and get like a formal letter of intent that yes, we want to participate. Like you bring your networks and Roberto brings it. Get a formal letter of intent because we're all we all know each other here, but we can leverage our own resources that we already have to just bring them on board to get things going. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. No. I'm very open and keen. I think. I mean, I think there's a kind of well, I wouldn't wait till like a big hackathon. What I would start thinking about is actually what are the physical assets, the tools, and the machinery that you can begin to pull together in your network. Also, who are the designers? You mentioned this expert in architecture and sustainable water, design for sustainable water use, and space. Space is really important too. In the case of L'Atelier Paysans, they have a truck and the truck literally goes around France and does basically they're hackathons, you know, they're makeathons where people are essentially ideating new machines and tools, and prototyping them and building them and testing them. So so I think you know you're not gonna get the solution in a single hackathon. It's going to be highly iterative, and you actually have to have the space, dedicated space, whether it's mobile space or whether it's fixed space. You got to have space. You got to have a place to put stuff, and you got to start pulling together the machines and the resources and the knowledge. And I know you're already doing that. But I think it's a developmental process, and I think that the global local, you know, the Cosmo local hackathon will be highly effective, but effective within that very deeply potentiated, locally potentiated context, where you know you've built the foundations and the resources to be able to bring in the ideas and to make them possible. You know, I think you know there's so many ideas in the world, and there'll be lots of things that you can experiment with, and lots of designs that you'll find. At the same time, I think it's that process-based, you know, with that capability, with those foundations, where those things are going to come to life in terms of real solutions. That's just my sense. You know, I don't know, but it's just my sense.
I just want to say thank you, because it's in that regard, I think the bond raising idea, in terms of even the water model thing, such a great idea, because we can almost start with ourselves amongst, in terms of finding the best solutions, and almost starting in each of our homes, implementing systems in our neighborhood. It's exactly that, taking the concept and trying it, to literally using this the bond raising, which for me really resonates. I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, and if you have the space to do that, you know, like you said, you have some makerspace connections or that science center. If you have the space to do that experimentation, you begin to design solutions for one of you. Exactly, and begin experimenting with what are the strategies that begin to solve those problems. But I think then that, yeah, there's different ways of mixing it. But yes.
I would maybe add to that to split the hackathon and already start basically the process with also tracks. For instance, one depending on what kind of solution we already know about. For instance, water purification, water harvesting, filtering. Basically, just create these buckets, and then maybe one bucket that says like, well, the combination of the above. So that people would have like, okay, well, we're gonna investigate a new way of filtering water that was not drinkable before. So that's gonna solve us. The other one would be like, okay, we're gonna purify it by using solar panel energy, and we just, how many solar panels do we need to just get seawater and purify it? You know, like there are already projects like this, but of course, then with this kind of solution, you would need the contribution of the government to basically invest in a project like that. But at least, you know, we have the plan already sorted out, sourcing technologies either from the open source community or getting inspired from actual business solutions that are already available.
I think what we could do is we could have like a series of hackathons. So the hackathons that bring people together from around the world to brainstorm ideas. So we all work collectively. Like say we're here in Cape Town now, and then, you know, each one of you have a small group in where you are. We all work together, and it's almost like we have breakout sessions, and then we come back together, meet, and we share all these ideas. We map them out on, maybe use Google Drive and just use a spreadsheet and map out all the ideas. Here's Melbourne's ideas, here's Amsterdam, here's Cape Town, so on and so forth, and map them all out. Then once we sorted that out, then we go away for maybe 1 or 2 months, and then we all work on each one of these ideas, and then we can all interact with each other across the network and help each other. So different teams, different people in different cities can be interested in Project A, and then different teams in different cities in Project B, Project C, like that. So you have this matrix of different digital autonomous organizations coming together spontaneously to work on these projects. And then we come together on the next 2 months later for another brainstorming hackathon to share what we've learned. You know, what have we done? What have we done with our local resources? What have we tried at home? What have we tried in the makerspace at the Cape Town Science Center, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah. You know, then we remix it. You know, so locally we're remixing, but then also.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. That's exactly what I was sensing in terms of, you know, a grounded participatory action research approach where there's localized experimentation, you know, ideation, prototyping, but it's nicely mixed with, you know, drawing on the global knowledge commons, global design commons, you know, to enrich that process and to really open up all of the different opportunities. You know, there might be things, there's going to be things that essentially what it is that there's going to be things that people could not have imagined were solutions, and they're going to come from the most unlikely sources, you know, and they're going to be manufacturing approaches that we just hadn't thought of, and I think that's the beauty in this, in terms of mixing the levels. It's really breaking out creatively. So yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, Gian.
So there's now synchronized with that is that you know, I don't know if you've seen the documentation, but we've been invited by Lorenzo to author a paper that he'll present in his journal. He's a director of a new journal called Solutions Journal. So he invited us to do either a peer review paper or else an opinion piece. We were talking and thinking that maybe the opinion piece is the better one because it's a shorter number of words and it's easier to do.
Yeah.
And so that's one target. And then there's this other one that Marcus and I and some other people and everybody's welcome to author as well. It's the one on Dr. Fire Sinai at the Bern University of Applied Science in Switzerland wants to work with us to develop contribute an article to an upcoming food journal on citizen approaches to food production, combining open source and circular economy. So we're going to develop a model that Marcus was talking about, combined with agroforestry and permaculture, mixing that with open source and circular economy. And so you're welcome to participate in both these, authoring in both of these. And both of these are actually, the publishing date is August 30th. So the Wellbeing Economy Festival happens in November 27th, 30th this year. And we're inviting participation from cities around the world. So anybody, like, you can help organize an event if you want. It can take whatever shape you want it to take. And we basically, what we're thinking about is to work on projects now that can then kind of mature so that we can present them at the Wellbeing Economy Festival. So one project is to actually create a white paper for an initial coin offering for this platform that Roberto's talking about. And another is if we could, I mean, just talking here about, say, the Cape Town water crisis and this hackathon, this could be another research output. You know, if we could co-author a paper here about this project. If we initiate it, we plan it, and we can actually take the steps from now till November and start executing it. We'll have lots of research outputs by that date. We can present it at the Wellbeing Economy Festival. We can have a paper
Yeah.
And those are the minor things. The real big impact is actually to make the transformation in society.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think that the relationship between writing and the relationship between writing. Oh, first of all, thanks for the offer, and I'll definitely be interested in having a look at what's written, and if there's something I can contribute, then I'll be happy to contribute. I think the relationship between research and development and writing needs to be carefully thought through so that they're very synergistic, you know, so that writing isn't, you know, oftentimes writing makes us feel good. You know, we get something published and people are reading it, but it really has to run in lockstep. From my own, you know, from learning from my own mistakes, with the research development that we do. Otherwise, writing it's a big task, you know. So it's writing. Anytime I commit to a paper or a book chapter, you know, it's 1 to 2 weeks out of my life. And if I really want to write it well, you know, and so I think that yeah, just think about the goals. Think about the transformative aim that you have, and then line up the writing to support that and support that you know, the research and development, so that it's not going in different directions, you know, because it'll soak up a lot of energy doing that writing, and it can't. And you know, writing is really important. You know, it can inspire people, or it can be documentation that allows other people to replicate what you've done. So writing is absolutely important. But I just think there's so many invitations out there. There's so many people like me trying to get other people to write stuff. You know, I edit a journal. You know, so I think you got to be real cautious as well from invitations. You know. Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing from you is that the impact is the most important thing. The writing has to be synced up to the impact, not the other way around.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
there has to be a really strong point around that. Yeah. Sorry.
yes, actually, the idea of this paper, or like in a way a manifesto of what it is that we're gonna do, it's basically it's exactly that. Like, make it very specific, very focused on what it is gonna be in what's gonna happen, so that then we can present this to the different entities that would be then be able to join as part of the initiative and the an offering. So indeed, I completely agree. It needs to be absolutely focused on what it is, you know, like just what is going to be the impact and how do you join.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jose, Roberto was talking to us earlier about how we could actually mock up the digital collaboration platform that we would ideally want to build, to get the ICO and get money funded from it. We could use Google Drive and just use a spreadsheet to actually map out the structure of this matrix, a project matrix, and people contributing from around the world, and have different project pages and so on. So just use the open source tools that are available now to actually show how it would actually work. And, and the money that we raise from the ICO would actually build the optimal platform that would do that. But in the meantime, we can actually use the tools that we have to actually just get on with the work.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense to me. Yeah. Just use the tools available to get on with it. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, you know, in Spiral in Wellington, you know, when before they developed CoBudget, the actual software, they were just using a Google spreadsheet and tracking everyone's amount that they had in their account and the contribution they made to each project. And then at a certain point, they decided this is getting way too complex and, you know, hard to manage with Google. We're just going to build a software that's going to do it for us. but they started with what was available there. That makes perfect sense.
Do you think we can use co-budget to our advantage on this prototyping thing?
I'd have to explain co-budget. It's a distributed decision-making platform for allocating money. So it's specifically around allocating dollar amounts, values. So let's say each one of us had $100 in our account. Any one of us can put a bucket, they call them buckets. They put buckets, are proposals for ideas that provide common value. And we all individually decide which buckets we want to fund. So I could put a bucket that says, you know, we need to develop a water filtration system of this type. Let's say I put that bucket forward. And let's say the network had 50 people, and each of those people had $100 in their account. And I would say, okay, well, what I need to build this is $500. Okay, this is what it's going to cost to prototype this thing. I would wait for that network to allocate it. One person might say, oh, it's so important, I'm going to give all of my co-budget dollars to that, 100. Another person might put 10. Another person might put 1. When it finally gets to 500, then it, in a sense, it gets, you know, it's fully funded, and then the money gets allocated to that person, and they go out and they do that thing for that money. So that's what that is. It's very specific. So the answer to, I don't know the answer to your question. All I could do is explain how the software works, and then you can figure that out, I guess. Yeah.
It sounds to me like a crowdfunding piece of software that you use then internally to basically give weight to the most important kind of aspect, or the one that seems the most promising.
That's right, except for the fact that anyone can propose an idea.
Yeah.
And they can sit there forever. You know, some of the co-budget ideas for 6 months and not be funded simply because people haven't decided that they want to fund that thing. Other things can get funded very quickly. But look, I don't want to be a proponent for it too much. It's just whether it fits the need or not. Yeah. So I'll just explain it, and then you can all figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
This is quite coincidentally with the stop reset go sticker.
Maybe explain the idea.
Sorry, I missed that.
So one of the ideas we were discussing this morning was a stop reset go sticker. It's basically just a glue back sticker that has stop, reset, go, and there's space for people to write in what behavior should be stopped, what it should be reset to, and where to go from there. Okay. And the idea is that you purchase this, it has a little QR code on it, and you go to the place that is doing something wrong and you stick the sticker up there. And it becomes a focal point for changing that thing. So let's say you have a park in your neighborhood that really needs a coat of paint on the playground. You go, you stick this up. People who go around can take the QR code, they can see what it's about, they can contribute to it if they want to. But also everyone that buys a sticker is already putting money in a pot that can be allocated to wherever it's needed.
Yeah, that sounds great. You just got to make sure the sticker is made out of super glue so that people can't get rid of it. Or they can only remove it when their behavior changes. So you have like a special formula, and you let them remove it when the whole situation changes.
But I also thought it could be abused too. Like if somebody is really like a real green warrior, you could stick it on somebody's expensive BMW.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Hey, I'm afraid I'm going to have to sign off. It's getting a bit late. So, look, it's very exciting, and yeah, let's have the meetings we need to, and yeah, where to from here?
I think you were saying that you would need some time to get some of your other local people involved, so we could have another meeting with more of your stakeholders.
Yeah. So basically, you know, I had planned to put together a Cosmo localization working group, and you know, these plans are great, and then 2 months go by. Um, so so there's probably about 20 to 30 people that I know in the network. People with a peer-to-peer foundation, people in Melbourne, across Australia, and so I probably need a few weeks to get the emails out, explain what it is, and to pull it together. And I was probably going to just use Lumio as a platform for people to connect. But anyways, yeah, that'll take me a little bit of time. And once that gets established, then yeah, we can have like a joint. I can set up a meeting. We can do it in an office in Melbourne, where we'll have present the project. You can present the project idea. Well, yeah, I mean, there has to be a hook. So I think presenting the project idea is good, but the hook, I think the hook needs to be that we're actually forming basically a global network for, you know, open source circular economy / Cosmo localization / gaming for Karma Commons, you know, et cetera, / everything else, right? Because we're all systems thinkers, and you know, it all happens together simultaneously, you know. So I think we need to in a sense provide that context and those hooks for people to know, okay, this is what I'm sort of getting myself into.
So actually, the white paper basically, because that is exactly the description of everything. Yeah. And how basically all these initiatives of indeed that you mentioned that we're all talking about, there are so many initiatives and they're all focusing on different aspects. How do we bring all these initiatives together into one single network that basically then has a way to operate and a way to exchange value within the network and basically create the new grid?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that value exchange is really key. And I've been using the term asymmetrical value exchange. Ecosystems work on the basis of asymmetrical value exchange. You know, the bee doesn't go to the flower and say, "Hey, I'm going to trade with you some, you know, dollars for your pollen." You know, and the flower doesn't say, "Oh, hey, can you transport my pollen around, and I'll give you some money." There's simply an asymmetrical value exchange because that's the way the ecosystem has worked itself out in terms of how value is exchanged. So I think it is about creating that ecosystemic framework around value exchange across all these different exciting projects, and so I think the platform you're talking about, Roberto, you know, sort of does that, and then there's other ones that do it in different ways. So it's just about how we sort of begin to think about that.
Good.
Could it go plus even these platforms? Yeah.
Cool. Okay. All right. Well, I have some work to do, and then maybe we try for 3 weeks or something like that.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And let's just be in touch.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Nice.
Talk to you soon.
Bye bye.
Yeah. And we're ourselves on the screen.
Oh, wait. There was something that didn't make sense. I kept looking here, and there's one person missing. It's Bernie. She's over there.
Yeah, I kicked my head on the side and that gave me a
She's actually here, but she's not there.
Yeah.
The pencil.
So, Marcus, you think the cool budget and stop recycle the sticker idea was a good synergy?
Yeah, that has. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get projects, get ideas for projects, get ideas for solutions for those projects, and then at the same time distribute the funding for it. So it might need multiple currencies. So you have
And feel free to pop in whenever you want.
Bitcoin, we'll use Bitcoin, the universal.
But I was wondering, when I was talking about, because when he said the bond rate, it's such a nice idea, especially in our community, literally, when I took Chiquita's done it. Perfect example of that in their own way. But it's, I don't want to steal you just have this whole workshop at your own place. There I was, I thought it would be so nice in our own community to then take it on the neighborhood. That's kind of what I was alluding to, so I wanted to explain. So I wasn't, the ship had held a wonderful workshop. I thought, what a nice thing. We literally done the neighborhood. So listen, next weekend, this is your weekend. So even at my neighborhood, I'd love to learn how and start going around.
And I was thinking like get the concept farm the hood, farm
Yeah.
in the hood, so that people like in the street.